Okay, hey, welcome to an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. A really cool review for you guys from the brand Erebus. They were founded and are driven by Jody Musgrove of YouTube's Just One More Watch and his partner and avid watch collector Stephen Parker. They aim to offer the best made watches with the best specifications at the best prices, and all with a personal service and attention to client that you just won't get from big brands. In terms of type of watch, this is a dive watch. Some key common characteristics and design, which you're looking for a diver. Of course, you're going to find water resistance, typically paired to some type of screw down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible, with a dive time bezel and a diverging extension is always nice if on bracelet. This is their Origin 40 in the blue colorway, and it has been completely redesigned as a perfect modern dive watch. It combines clean and legible design with rugged materials and highly wearable ergonomics, and now even features a clear DLC hard coating, all for even at the full price. I guess this video is being made post all of the early bird pricing, but even at the full price, it's $4.99, guys. That's direct from the brand. This sample was kindly provided by the brand for the purpose of this review, but no brand ever has any input on the video, and all thoughts and feedback are always my own. So again, no editorial input or anything like that. They actually see the video when you guys do. So yeah, this one is a really fun one. Honestly, the first iteration wasn't necessarily my cup of tea. I thought it was a little bit too specific. I do feel like with the refinements that they've made here, we'll see. We'll see. We'll jump into the review right now. Okay, now apart from, of course, this clean, modern, and angular aesthetic, the proportions have been something that have been quite dialed in since the very beginning. Now, in terms of its current dimensions, 40 millimeters in diameter, 12 millimeters thick, and 46 millimeters lug to lug. So on paper, pretty seamless in terms of what you would want and expect from something within this range. Also, I mean, proportionally, although it's 12 millimeters, you can see that thin mid case looks great, especially contrasting off of that nice tall and very grippy bezel. Now, getting into some more details, guys, this does have a hardened clear DLC diamond-like carbon coating on it. So the nice thing is to be very, very scratch resistant. So basically, regular steel is going to have certain hardness Vickers, and then you're going to add on top of that. So like 400 hardness Vickers typically for 316L, and then you're going to add 800 more hardness Vickers on top of that. It's going to be 1200 hardness Vickers on the scale. So very, very robust in terms of, to go along with, of course, the aesthetic, right? This looks like a watch that's overbuilt and it's tough. The nice thing, it's not oversized. It's really nicely proportioned and dialed in. Now, you do have this nice low double dome sapphire. I appreciate the fact they went with a lower dome, but still went the extra mile to get it to be a sapphire, I should say a double dome, right? Because they could have just done a low dome on the outer and then flat on the inner. But you can see that there's very low to any distortion there. So that would mean that even at harsh angles, they have to maintain that double dome. So very, very nice for legibility, and even more important when you're under the water. But I would say, hey, when you're doing your daily readings and whatnot, very, very nice to have that. And again, I do like that it doesn't protrude too much, but they didn't go with a flat. They added just that little bit of dimension, which I can appreciate. And again, makes a big, big difference when you're underwater. Now, this bezel, guys. Whew. I wasn't expecting this from a $500 watch. I mean, this thing sold for just over $400. And some of these early bird specials, that is a lovely, lovely bezel action. Nice and notchy. Beautifully smooth, though, still. So you always want to find that sweet spot. Some people prefer things be a bit notchier. Maybe like an Oris Aquis. That can be a little bit overly notchy for me, a little too rough. And then on the other side, something like a Seiko, bezel action, which is very smooth with almost like a delayed click action. This is very nicely. Even the acoustics. Fast, slow. Very nice. So yeah, I can't undersell that. I think that for those of you that want that tactile engagement, do like a nice grip, a nice action, that's there for you. Now, it does have a matte ceramic, fully lumed bezel insert. Of course, some of you are thinking, this definitely does give you some of those original Tudor Pelagos vibes. And it does. It absolutely does, but it's in a more refined package that's more, I'd say, similar to something like their Pelagos 39, which is a very nice kind of daily option. But of course, price ranged out of reach for most folks. Now, you do also get, having some technical difficulties with the light there, pardon that, with this very nice, look at that fine grip there on that crown action. So very nice tactile engagement there as well. Beautifully signed, nice crown guards, nice tight tolerances, nothing too crazy, because again, it is quite angular, so it's not like they were going to go to make everything flow there. So there are going to be straight lines there, but I'd say still nice and tight. Same for where the end link and the case meet, very nice tight tolerances. Now, although you can't see it, underneath that nice sterile, relatively sterile, slightly etched case back, you're going to have the venerable Miyota 9015, which has a 42-hour power reserve and beats at 4 hertz or 28,800 vibrations per hour in terms of that beat rate, which is great. Also keeps everything nice and thin. And because of the more robust construction, I'll say the Miyota 9000 series rotor whir is less audible. You'll still probably be able to feel it a bit on your wrist, but for those of you that are sensitive about that, for me, I actually enjoy it. It's not something that I, especially when you think about a lot of these 75 movements, really enjoy, and even getting into the 7750 Swiss chronograph movement. I mean, that's another one that has a kind of a runaway rotor. So I don't mind it, but for those of you that are sensitive about it, I will say it is, I'd say it's more sedated than you would get from what you might expect from a watch with such a thin mid case. Now, getting to the dial, matte textured dial, BGW9 Superluminova, Lume blocks. You get an applied logo, which is great. That applied logo is quite nice. It actually ties in beautifully to the framed date window there at 6 o'clock. So very nicely balanced. And then, so you have that there. And then also across, of course, you have the 3D Lume blocks. So you have the painted hands that keep the theme all quite white. And then that also ties in to the fully loomed bezel insert. So I think this is all really well balanced from that perspective. 20 atmospheres or 200 meters of water resistance, 20 millimeter lug width here, beautiful solid H-link bracelet, quick release spring bars built in, very nice taper here, going to go from about 20 millimeters down to 16, and then about an 18.5 or 18.4 from my caliper width on this very nice deployant here. That is fully, the dive clasp is fully milled, nicely contoured, and you can see that it does have 4 positions of toolless micro adjustment there. It was already extended. You can ratchet it in, it holds, but you do have that. So very nice there, and it just relieves you from the need of having to have a a half link or anything like that, because that's going to be nicely dialed in. I do like this very cool applied logo. It's just going a little extra mile instead of having it etched. Let me give it a quick little wipe here. Check that out. So with that said, let's actually get this on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this looks beautiful. Very nicely dialed in terms of the visual proportions, that dial to bezel ratio, and of course the physical footprint itself at just 40 millimeters is definitely a sweet spot for many wrists. And at mine, although slightly on the larger side of average at about 19 centimeters in circumference, you can see that it's quite a tall wrist. So it's not like it's super wide, flat, and accommodating. So the fact that it still sits quite nicely on here is really telling. Of course, if you got my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, you can notice quite a bit of perspective distortion. All of a sudden, the sides of my wrist fall away, making the sides of the bracelet also fall away. But if I keep my wrist here, you can see a different story. So I'll keep my wrist nice and low, and then just tighten up the frame here so that you guys can get still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio. That's how this may lay on your own wrist, and all of a sudden, look at that. it's just reading a little bit more naturally, more centered on wrist, as you would expect and how you would see with the naked eye. So very nice. Lays quite flat, although of course it is quite angular. It's not like it's sitting up off the wrist elevated, so I'm sure that came into play with that nice solid case back, which some will say that is how it should be for a dive watch. I don't mind a display back, as long as of course it's not adding any or not adding too much additional thickness, and that there's a nicely decorated rotor on movement to look at. But I'll say here, look at that. This is what I enjoy. The thinness, the low profile, but still retaining that edge of the fact that it is quite angular and purpose feeling, and that just has that overbuilt nature that I love. This is kind of an ode to a simpler time of microbrands. This reminds me of so many older models, and in a very good way. Not that it seems like it's an homage to those models, but it just, again, more of an homage to that era, that early 2010s era where the specs were just through the roof. And typically they weren't this thin though, right? Those were a lot of NH powered watches. Now to get this with a 9000 series movement still at $499, I think that is relatively outstanding. And then you add in modern niceties, of course, like the Lume here, which is amazing. The Lume blocks and the fine attention to details, whether it be the dial or the bezel action or this beautifully flowing H-link bracelet with micro adjusting clasp. Very, very cool. So with that said, let's get it off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Hey, look at that Lume. It is absolutely blazing. Of course, with that dual indice there at the 12 o'clock, you're going to have instant orientation, whether this is on your wrist or on your nightstand. And as much as I'm enjoying soaking in the brightness here, one thing I always do like to work in is going to be a bit of a low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And guys, look at this thing go. Look at it glow, look at it go. But look, even when it's in direct lighting here, look at that. I love the fact that the blues match just about perfectly, but you're having two different surfaces, right? You're getting that granular textured surface, and then you're getting that smooth matte finish, playing off of it. So it just makes it feel like there's levels. It makes this just feel, again, this looks beautifully designed. This isn't just something where they lifted simple design cues and reprinted them somewhere else in their own font. There was a level of curation here that I appreciate, because again, it as a watch collector, a longtime collector, and I have been on YouTube for quite some time too, doing watch reviews, guys. There are a lot of references that this reminds me of, and I know some people just write this off as a simple, Pelagos type of homage, but there's a lot of other design cues and subtle ones, and some not so subtle, some a little bit more overt, that I think this really speak to. And when we have watches like, of course, the new Longines Hydro Conquest out there offering that kind of mainstream bang per buck proposition, right? That kind of gives you a little bit of everything. It's nice to see on the other end of the spectrum, you have watches like this from Erebus that are going to give you, I'd say, even maybe a little bit more, since you get the hard coating here, from, of course, for less, right? From a brand that is brand centric, that is customer centric. So I do like that a whole lot. But with that said, let's go ahead and get the lights back on, get into some closing thoughts here, guys. On the wrist, very balanced wear profile, modern angular aesthetic with perfectly dialed in proportions. In terms of model variants, do check the site links for current options and availability, because of course these do sell in and out and restock in batches typically. It is also available with a Jubilee-style bracelet, which they did send along, and I do plan to do a follow-up video on the Jubilee bracelet eventually. Now, in terms of comparable models, guys, the $500 microbrand diver market might just be the most value-rich segment in watch collecting today. And the new Origin 40 is definitely holding its own, feeling like kind of a cross between industry staples like Zelos and Traska, right? I say Traska because Traska is really known for adding that extra bit of oomph when it comes to having that hard coating. And now you're getting that here. So yeah, and you're still getting things like the 3D Lume. You're getting the applied logo. These are like the things that we ask about in every other watch review, right? Why didn't they add this? Why didn't they put the date at 6 o'clock, right? Like, but they've done it all here, and it makes sense that this is coming from a brand that's, you know, co-founded by a YouTube guy, because he's read all of the comments and you guys have left them all. So this is one that, you know, I know it's not going to be for everybody, but it could absolutely fulfill, I think, most to any needs. So bottom line, guys, Steve and Jody have refined their once semi-niche diver, at least in my humble opinion, in their first Origin diver that they released, into just a really more robust and versatile option. So it's just they've raised the bar, but they didn't make it over the top. I like that, right? They also refined it. They didn't just try to one-up themselves in terms of spec. They didn't make it bigger and louder. They made it better and more refined. So with that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please do like. And if you ever need, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.